here to the railroad part to talk about the Texas Railroad Commission. But I really should be somewhere else. I should be at an oil refining plant or a drilling site or something like that, because the Texas Railroad Commission has nothing to do with drilling. Now, for those of us who grow up in Texas, this is something that we learned in our 4th grade Texas history class. And, for a state that's known for having a lot of weird quirks, this is a fairly normal one. But it shows up in the news from time to time, and people always seem like they're surprised by it. So I thought I'd talk about it for a bit. It is true that the Texas Railroad Commission does not govern the railroad industry in Texas. It governs the oil and gas industry, including such activities as exploration, drilling, and transportation of the product. Back in the 1890s, it did begin as a regulatory agency for the railroad, but its jurisdiction over the freight which was being transported using those railroads meant that it was able to expand into other methods of hauling freight or moving it, such as trucks and pipelines, as those became a normal way of moving freight around the state, and into the production side of the oil industry. In the 20th century, as the importance of oil to the national economy grew and grew, the Railroad Commission's regulatory activities over oil became more and more influential, because with Texas as one of the largest hotspots for domestic production in the entire United States, the rules set in Texas often became the national standard for policy. As the 20th century wore on, things began to change. The Department of Transportation took over transportation by bus, truck, and railroad in the 1980s, leaving the increasingly inadequately named Railroad Commission solely in charge of oil and gas. But by this point, with the formation of OPEC in the 60s and the overall decline in U.S. oil production in the second half of the 20th century, its influence had decreased somewhat. However, it still is very important for United States domestic oil production, and particularly with the return to prominence of the oil industry through new technologies such as fracking, it wants to again become something that we need to care about. Now, the reason this is important for regular people like you and me is that this is an elected office. It is not something that is appointed by the state. The railroad commissioners are chosen by voters in the general election every couple of years. This is vital knowledge because if you're unfamiliar with the title of railroad commissioner and you see it as you go into the voting booth, you may think this is just some relatively inconsequential minor office that's more of a figurehead than anything else, and you may just decide to pick some name or check some box. But obviously, in a state that has activities such as drilling, refining, or major office for most of the world's large oil companies, the activities of the Railroad Commission are very important and should not just be left to someone haphazardly chosen because you liked what their name was or what the party is that they represent. You should pay attention to the actual person and their opinions that affect how they will act in that office. And this is something that I like to talk about a lot. You know, if you consider yourself a discouraged voter who doesn't think that your vote would ever matter in a major election because you're just one in millions, or you really don't want to vote in the presidential election because, you know, both of them are idiots anyway, or something like that, there are still reasons for you to show up at the ballot box and vote. All over the state and all over your town, there are state level, county level, and local level offices that are filled by normal people from your community who often win their races on very small margins, but the decisions they make can have just as much of an impact on your life as the national races if not more. And so it is very important that not only do you go and you make a vote in those races, but you be educated about what those offices do, you be informed about the people who are running for them and what they stand for and what they're likely to do once they get into those offices, and that you not just walk into the ballot box and make one choice to vote straight ticket for everything. It's not allowed in Texas to do one check, single straight ticket voting anymore, but a lot of people still just do go in and check D for everything or check R for everything. Please, please don't do that.